Okay, and now I'm going to share my screen so we can get started. Oops, hold on one second. One second. Here it is. All right. I hope everybody can see it. If not, send a message and I'll try to address it. Actually, I can't see that box, but anyways, I'll stop every now and in a while to make sure that if there's any questions, we'll get answers. So again, this is the home composting preview. Let's get started. Today's obviously Saturday. One thing, I really enjoy teaching these classes live from the Arboretum in person. And I got this I got this picture from one of our co-workers who sent this from a while. So anyways, this is what it looks like. Every time I did this classes, I made sure I brought a bunch of stuff from home and collected from the Arboretum so that I can build a pile right in front of the audience. But unfortunately, we can't do it that today, but I'll do my best in terms of virtual. Today is mostly a PowerPoint presentation, but the next 2 weeks, October 10th, I will have material and I will go through it. So anyways, let's get started. So what is compost? This pretty much became organic matter used as plant fertilizer, plain and simple. Now, what is organic? Now, if we look at the definition of organic, you would find lots and lots of definitions. In terms of composting, it's just plain simple, anything relating to or derived from living matter. In other words, something that was alive at some point. It'll make more sense as we move on and you learn a little bit more about why should we compost at home? Why should we even care about composting? Well, there's a problem, right? We're generating a lot of trash. We got so much trash that we're running out of places where to put this trash. As a matter of fact, the EPA has estimated that 30 to 35% of this trash could be diverted at home by, composting, by saving your greens, composting your greens, and that would reduce the amount of trash that goes into the landfill. It's a big problem. But there are other good things that you can get from composting, like you can make your own plants food and fertilizer. If you keep the plants happy, you can avoid pests. You can reduce the amount of pesticides or fungicides that you need for your plants. In other words, you keep the soil healthy, you can prevent all those things from coming, or all those pests coming to your plants. Now, but best of all, especially if you have plants, like fruits or vegetables, you're growing your own food, you are what you eat. And you got to be careful what you put in your compost, or in the soil, I should say, because you don't want to be eventually eating that stuff that you don't want there. So if you do the compost right, you don't have to worry about any of those things. Best of all, you know exactly what you put in your pile, and you don't have to worry about having all those maybe unwanted chemicals or pesticides in your food. So today I'm going to be focusing on the methods of composting. This is the one that I'm going to be talking about, a little bit in this session. And on October 10th, this is what I'm going to be focusing. It's called hot composting. Here's the thing with hot composting. Well, it's hot they call it hot for a reason. Basically, you cook the compost, or somebody else does for you. And I'll go through that. So the thing with hot composting is only one batch. It's one batch. You have to get all your materials or your ingredients, get them all ready to go, put them together in a way that I'm going to show you how to do that. I probably won't get that today, but hopefully you can come back in October and I go through the process. So once you have all those materials, you add them together in a certain way, and you can raise the temperature from that compost pile up to 160 degrees. At the Arboretum, I was able to get it to 150 degrees, but we're composting at a larger scale there. But anyways, this is what I'm going to be focusing. And the reason I'm going to be focusing on hot composting is once you get this concept, everything else is piece of cake. So just want you to learn the concept. I'm sorry. Then there's cold composting. And this is the same thing as hot composting. The only difference is that unlike hot composting, with cold composting, you're only going to have material whenever you have it available. In other words, you can just keep on adding every day, every night that you have kitchen leftovers, yard waste, whatever it is, you can add it that night, and it just takes a lot longer. The thing with hot composting is if you do it right, you can get a finished product as fast as 3 weeks, a month, 4 weeks. It's really, really quick. With cold composting, you're still doing the same thing, but you're not involved or as active as hot composting. It can take really anywhere from 4 months to 8 months, maybe 2 years. It's really up to you and how you manage it. So most of us usually end up with cold composting. It's more passive unless you have a lot of materials and you need the finished product fast, then hot compost is the way to go. So then there's vermicomposting, and this is on the last class that I'm going to be teaching, which is on November 14th. This is more like a smaller scale, especially with kitchen scraps. All your kitchen leftovers or your dinner leftovers from previous night, it can go into the compost bin. It's much smaller scale, so you can have this under your kitchen sink, in your office, like I did, under the desk. And if you do it right, you don't never have to worry about problems or odors or any of that stuff. So it's another way to go if you're not producing that much materials, or if you're just interested in composting kitchen leftovers. Then there's windrow composting, or more like commercial. It's just like I mentioned. This is what we do at the Arboretum. Everything that gets trimmed, rake, whatever it is, it goes into our compost pile. It gets broken down, and we use it either as mulch or as compost. Many different uses, and we try to be as sustainable as possible. So anyways, whatever we get out of the Arboretum, it stays at the Arboretum. We also get sometimes we get to collect kitchen waste from the gastronome, and that was really picking up the pile, or really heating up the pile. So hopefully we can get that program back and running, so we can divert less trash into the OC waste management. But anyways, one thing, since we don't get anything out of the Arboretum, the only other thing that we get from outside sources is the manure, or the horse manure. We do have a staff member that her family owns horses, and they bring the manure, which speed up the process. It's actually inactivated. I'll be talking about it actually in the next class, but I'll be touching up again. Then there's another method, which is called anaerobic composting. And here's one thing, I never venture into this, and it's really easy. All you need is something like a bucket, put your food waste in there, seal it for a year, 6 months, for a year. And once you open it, it's going to stink. But the other problem is that it also generates methane. And, we don't need any more greenhouse gases going out there. And by the way, any of this compost, whether you go hot or cold, if you don't do it right, and let's say you forget to turn your pile and it becomes anaerobic, then you're going to start generating methane too. So, but if you follow the process or the steps that I'll teach you, you don't have to worry about those things. Now, there's several bins. Here's the thing with the bins. You have to, well, hopefully after the class, and hopefully after the class on October 10, you get an idea of what you need, because you have to figure out how much waste you're producing, what kind of waste, and so that you can figure out what kind of bin it's going to work for you. So here's one, and this is the one that I have here at home. And maybe at the end, I'll show you. It's in the back. I'll show you what it looks like. But it's pretty practical. It retains heat. That's one of the things. By the way, the heat, and I'll be covering in the next class. People get the misconception that, since it's hot compost, hey, I'll just put this thing in the sun so it can warm up faster. But in reality, the heat is internal. It's all biological activities happening in there. There's lots of bacteria, fungi, and it's just creating a lot of heat. So anyways, it's good at retaining that heat because it keeps all of those organisms I just mentioned active, and they keep degrading or decomposing your materials. It's pretty nice too, and you can't see it on this picture, but it has a lid on the top, it has a lid on the bottom, or a trapdoor, so that, you know, when compost is finished on the bottom, you can just extract the finished product, but you keep adding on the top. So the cool thing about the lid is that it keeps unwanted visitors away. In other words, you want to see raccoons or possums or something like that trying to get into your compost pile. Then there's the tumblers. The tumblers are pretty neat. You got to be pretty active with them. The cool thing about it is that you don't need a shovel to like turn your compost piles in every once in a while. You just turn the tumbler and it speeds up the process eventually. But here's the thing. I get a lot of calls from people. It's just like, hey, Miguel, I got a rotating tumbler. Do you want it? And it's like, they're always giving them away. It's like, why? And you know, it's just the involvement or being active. But if it works for you, then that's great. Then there's a 3-bin composter. So this one I recommend if you're producing a lot of material. If you have a big yard and you're producing a lot of leaves, twigs, branches, whatever it is, you have tons of material, then you definitely need something like this. So it's a 3-bin compost, and you can make this at home. It's easy. And what it is remember what I said with the hot compost pile. You need to gather all your ingredients, get everything at once so that you can build one pile. Once you have that pile, you can't add any more until it's done. That's the difference between cold and hot and cold. The cold is more passive. You can add as you go whenever you feel like it, but it just takes a little longer. Now, the thing with the 3-bin compost is that you can start a pile or a batch, and you don't have to wait till that's done because you can start another one, or you can just keep rotating and keep on going. In other words, well, like I said, it's just if you have too much material, then this is the one that will work. And then the last class, I'm going to be focusing on the warm bin compost. Well, actually, I'm going to be talking about the maintenance of warm composting. And I also going to show you how to build your own compost or warm compost bin, which is really easy. And we'll go through the process, and we'll also have the worms ready to show you. So again, this is more like on a smaller scale. This is something you can fit in the kitchen, especially if you're living in an apartment and you don't have, you know, the luxury to have one of these compost bins, or this, they can get pretty big, right? But you know, there's always warm composting, which is at the smaller scale, and it can be put in a place where you can just hide it under your sink or under the desk like I do. What to compost? So pretty much all organic matter. So again, going back to organic, what I mean here is that you can pretty much anything that was alive at some point, you can throw it on your pile. Now, through the class, I'm going to talk how to discriminate on what can go in the pile. Let me backtrack a little bit. In terms of hot composting, you can pretty much throw anything in there, anything that was alive at once, and it'll degrade as long as you do it right and you raise the temperature to at least 150 degrees. Then you don't have to worry about pathogens or chemicals that won't degrade, et cetera, et cetera. If you do it right, you can pretty much throw it in there. Now with cold composting, or if you don't do right the hot compost, then you can't do those things. You know, if you for some reason threw like I don't know, an infested plant with insects, and you know the temperature didn't raise enough, then guess what? When you get your compost product, you're gonna spread it on your soil, and you're gonna get it infested all over again. So through the workshop, I will show you teach you how to discriminate on certain things that shouldn't go there. Although you can put everything if you do it right, of course, doing hot compost. So some of the things that you can add, you know, food scraps out, right? Apple cores, broccoli, lettuce, onions, eggshells, etc. Pretty much all the kitchen scraps. Excuse me. In terms of yard waste, you know, leaves, grass, branches, mulch, whatever it is, once alive, you can throw it in there as well. Other things, manures, horse, chicken, rabbit, fish bone, any of those manures, and I'll tell you the importance of it. I believe it's on the next class, but I'll touch a little bit on it today. So certain things that you can add. Also, thing with egg. Oh, actually, let me go through this. I'll get to the activators. Thing with eggs. If you, what do you do with your eggshells, right? I'm going to recommend for you to rinse them before you crush them and throw them in your compost pile because they'll degrade too, and they're high in calcium. The other thing is if you have a snail problems, crush those eggs. Make sure you wash them, rinse them before crush them, and sprinkle them on your garden, and that should get rid of the slugs, right? They don't. Their skin is too fragile for that, so they'll just go away. So hey, you don't need pesticides to get rid of them or toxic stuff in your garden, right? Here's the thing. I'm going to start focusing on the things that I'm going to cover in the next class, or certain topics that I'll be covering. So I'm going to keep talking about the maintenance of it. I'm going to tell you, I'm going to show you or make suggestions of what's the best location for your compost bin. Again, it also depends on what kind of compost bin you choose. You got to pick one that actually suits or fits your needs, your habits. We're all different. We all have different backgrounds, different cultures. So one thing that might work for me might not work for you, but this is also a learning process. But if you know the basics, if you know the concepts, you'll have no problem with that. I'm going to be covering troubleshooting. You know, if your pile, nothing's happening with your pile, I'm going to give some suggestions of what you can do. It's really easy once you get the concept. And I'm going to be comparing hot versus cold composting. I'm going to be talking about the pros and cons. I mentioned some of them already, but I'll go more into that. And then obviously we're going to talk about the finished product. What do you do with it, right? And to show you, I have some compost here. I don't know if you can appreciate it in the camera, but if you just see it laying around, you would think that it's just some dirt, right? But anyways, it's compost and it's rich in minerals, pretty much all the plant essentials for the plant. So I'm going to be focusing on green versus brown. This is really important terminology because there's a way that you need to mix this too so that you can get the fast result and you can heat up your pile. And you know, and just to show, I'm going to touch up a little bit on some of the studies that I have done so that I can show you that there's science behind it. Not just that somebody just decided to put something together. It's like, yeah, it works. So I'll be talking about the carbon to nitrogen ratio. And this is very important when it comes to the greens and the browns. The perfect combination that you need to have a pile process a lot faster. I'm going to be talking about activators. I mentioned a little bit about manures. Manures are great activators. They're rich in nitrogen. So I'm going to be covering some of those and how to add them to the pile to get fast results. I'm going to be showing you how to build in the pile, our hot compost pile. And remember, once you get the concept of how the hot pile works, then you can pretty much do any on it. Like I said, most of us are going to settle with the cold compost because it's more passive, it's less active. But you know, some of you might be interested in faster results. It's like, hey, I want a finished product like in a month, so you can do the hot. So I'm also going to be covering things, what not to add. So just like the importance of what to add in your pile, there's also the what not to add. And I'll be covering each of this, like don't add meat, don't add your pet's waste, no meat or bones, no dairies. And I'm going to tell you why on each of those. So I'll be covering those things, but keep in mind, if you're doing hot compost, you don't have to worry about these things. You can add pretty much all of it, but you just have to make sure it gets hot enough. But if you're doing cold composting or you're not sure about if you're doing hot compost right, then please avoid all these things. And I'm going to tell you why in the next class. So I'm also going to cover a few examples of plants plants to avoid adding into your pile. And this list includes such as invasive. You don't want invasive plants. You don't want poisonous types. You don't want pH imbalancers or fibrous, disease or insect infested plants. And again, hot compost can handle all of that and pretty much degrade all of it. But if you're not doing it right or you're doing cold, then you might just want to avoid this. And I will tell you why it's the importance of that. So I'm getting to the end here. So why compost at home? Well, first of all, you're diverting a lot of trash that goes into the landfills. We're running out of space in terms of landfill. And this stuff that can be diverted at home, it not only saving the environment, but you're also making cleaner food for your plants or fertilizer. And if you keep the soil healthy, then your plants are really going to thrive. And best of all, well, you are what you eat, right? We are what you eat. So why not best way to compost at home so that you know exactly what you're eating if you're eating your vegetables and your fruits or whatever you're raising at home. The next composting workshops, it'll be obviously the one that I keep mentioning, October 10, 2 weeks at 9 o'clock. 9 o'clock. If you haven't registered, please do so. Help us spread the word. And again, it'll be a little different in terms of I will have a moderator. I like to teach when there's interaction. I like to interact with the audience. I like to ask questions. I like to hear them so that I can make sure that I'm addressing questions or the needs or problems that might arise. So that will be a little different because the moderator is going to help me like, hey, Miguel, we got a question on this. And I'll try to answer as soon as I can. But also there'll be a small section at the end where I'll be trying to answer more questions if there are some. And then the last class would be composting with worms. Again, this is for more smaller scale, and this is something you can have at home in a tiny little place, or especially if you live in an apartment. That's on November 14, also at 9 o'clock. Same thing, I will have a moderator, and it'll be more interactive. I'll have a chance to stop and answer some of the questions. So if you haven't registered, or if you need to tell your friends, your neighbors, your family members, please direct them to the fullertonarboretum.org where you can register. You can also contact me at mimacias@fullerton.edu. By the way, if I don't get to your questions today, please note that I will be taking notes. I'll be writing all this to make sure I address them in the next compost workshop. So that I thank you, and I'll go to see if you have some questions because we have just 5 minutes. Give me 1 second. Okay, so barking dog. Oh, that was on the thing. So I think that was me, the barking dog. I apologize. There's 3 big dogs behind me, so I'm sorry about that if that was mine. Let's see. Dog manure. I'm going to be covering all these things. The thing with dog manure, you might not want to include it in your compost pile, especially if it's cold compost pile, because well, animals' feces, they transfer pathogens, and you don't want that stuff in your compost pile, because if it doesn't degrade, if you don't get it hot enough, then you're going to transfer those diseases not just to your plants, but especially if you're raising veggies or fruits, then they're going to get in there and you might get sick. So avoid all meat eaters manure, and I'm going to be covering more of that. So hot compost, what degrees is safe? Well, if you can get it as hot as possible, then that's really good. And again, at the Arboretum, I have no problems raising the temperature to 150 degrees. It's pretty hot. Typically, you're going to see no more than, especially in cold compost, it's going to be like anywhere from 90 to 110. If you're doing hot compost, and I'm going to be covering this in the next section, I definitely recommend for you to have a compost thermometer, because you need to monitor the temperature. Once it drops to 120 degrees, then it's time for you to come and turn the pile, add water, and keep monitoring the temperature. So you got to keep the temperature up. Let's see. Okay, I'm not sure I understand that. For egg allergy children, is hot compost egg okay? Here's the thing. I'm not sure if I'm going to answer this correctly, but what I'm understanding is if it's okay if you throw eggs into the compost pile. Here's the thing. If you're doing hot compost pile, everything that you put in there, it's going to degrade. So it shouldn't be any problem. Now, if you're doing cold compost and you really can't do hot compost, and you still want to throw those eggshells there, then you just have to make sure that the compost pile stays there a lot longer. In other words, instead of getting finished product in 6 months, I would recommend to wait a year or a year and a half, or etc., to make sure that everything degrades. Because eventually everything will degrade. It just takes a lot longer. But if you do hot compost, you shouldn't have to worry about those. those things, or just wait a lot longer. Let's see. Where can you get hot compost already made in small portions? That's a great question. You can get them the hardware stores, such as Home Depot, Lowe's, Ace Hardware Store. You can get it at all those places. But here's the thing. One of the things, let's say you decide to go with organic compost, and you go to the store and it says organic compost. Hey, why should I do all that work at home? It's like, who cares? It's like, I can just get the organic compost and I can do it at home, easy. I don't have to harvest that trash or whatever, or worry about smell. But here's the thing, when you buy organic compost, I'm sure it's processed correctly, but the thing is, they themselves, the manufacturers, they really don't know what's in there. I mean, they just collect stuff from all over the place. Like there are cities where you can actually, well, let me go back to this. Your green compost bin, right? You throw all your greens in there, and they go to the waste management, and they sort them, and they do some compost. Some manufacturers collect this stuff, but the thing is that they have no idea what the material came from. Now, and I'm sure it happened to you, but I'm sure some of you, like let's say they had some sort of pest problem, and you came and you spray your plant with fungicides or pesticides, and then nothing happens, so you decide to cut the plant, you put it in the green bin, and then it goes in there, they see it, and when the manufacturers get all this stuff, it's like, they really don't know where it came from. So hopefully they go through the process where, hot compost, where they kill pretty much everything, and it works fine. But the truth is, you don't really know. But if you do it at home, you know exactly what's in there. You know exactly what you put in there, and eventually, we're gonna eat it, right? One way or the other. Now, I'm running out of time here. One thing I wanted to show you, for those coffee drinkers, if you're brewing coffee at home, what are you doing with those coffee grounds? So I'm going to tell you what to do with it, because if you pull your filter just like this, you can just throw it in your compost pile. The other thing is, it's also an activator, so it's great to speed up the process of composting. You don't drink coffee? How about tea? What do you do with your tea bags? They can also go in there. It's all green, right? It's organic plant material. The only thing you have to watch out is sometimes they come with the staples. You don't want that stuff in your compost pile. It's not going to degrade anytime soon. It's going to take a long time. And again, what does the finished product look like? Well, it looks something like this. I already showed you. It looks just like soil. Smells fresh. It looks nothing like what you got. You can't see any pores. You can't see any rotten tomatoes. Any of that stuff. It's all decomposed. It's all broken down to its essential elements. So we're out of time. Please join us on October 10 to continue this workshop, and November 14 if you're interested in how to build your own one bin and how to maintain it. Otherwise, see you. Hopefully, I'll see you on October 10 and November 14. If you have any questions, please feel free to email me, and I will be checking more comments on this from this chat. So if I didn't get to your question, I'll try to answer it in the next workshop. Thank you, everyone, and have a great day. Enjoy your Saturday.